On this episode of CPR Ford Garage, mistakes were made, but we're tearing down the 69 F100, the other half of this equation. Removing both doors to make the cab lighter, as I'm going to be moving it around quite a bit as I fit it to the new chassis. Okay, so taking the front clip off, the only stuff you really have to unhook is all the wires that go from the cab and run through, which would be headlights, marker lights, and then the wires going to the small posts on the solenoid, and then to the constant side of the solenoid. Show you here. You basically unhook all the wires from there, unsnap from there, and you can just kind of, you have to fish them out through the hole in there, which is a little bit difficult. They come out through there, and then you're able to unplug everything, pull them out, and then we'll just drape that over for now. The other side's all unhooked too. So we're gonna try to take the whole front clip off as a unit. We'll see if Bryce is eating his Wheaties today. you were so much stronger than me. Okay. Ready? Yeah. I'm gonna try to start letting it down. Shit. No, let's just stop. Figure out what we're gonna do. Oh. So the keen viewer will notice at this point that I stopped the video. Why is that? Well, I'm trying to keep this a family show, and there was a lot of bad words that needed to be said right there. So nobody got hurt. The cab isn't damaged. It really wasn't that big of a deal. I'm convinced that the theory is sound, having ratchet straps in an X pattern, ratchet strapped to the rocker panels and going across the floor, and then the cherry picker hooked to that. But what happened was, you'll notice at one point that I grabbed the grinder and cut something under the truck. Well, I forgot to unhook the e-brake cable on this cab as well. So I see a pattern here. I think what happened is that started things in motion as far as tipping the cab forward, because it was pulling on that e-brake cable, and that we were never able to get it back balanced from that, and we should have stopped and put a jack under the front of it or did something different, but we got it figured out, and no harm, no foul basically. But you'll see a cherry picker actually turns out to make a pretty good cab dolly if you just set the cab right on the legs of the cherry picker. So that's still where it lives for now. And on to this. This is the bed that I am cutting up. Now, some people might be upset about this, but if you could have shown me a short bed to buy, I would gladly buy it. So I got this bed, that tailgate, these inner fenders, which are mint by the way, steering column, outer fenders over there, this cab that I didn't even really want, that's pretty mint as well, and is now the play cab for my boys. I got all of that rust-free mint Wyoming sheet metal for like 500 bucks. Thank you, Wyoming. You'll notice in the next part of this video that the footage is pretty old. And honestly, I started the bed shortening in June this summer, and my goal was to do the entire bed shortening and show you how to do that all in one episode. But I ran into problems getting the front to fit back on there, and I finally got it figured out, but it took a long time. And then meanwhile, while that's going on, I decided instead of just doing the front suspension swap to swap the entire frame. I'm not going to show you a ton in this part. I'm going to show you a quick synopsis of what I've done to the front, okay? You might notice my measurements that I give are a little bit different than everybody else's. The common figures quoted are 16 inches out of the front, 4 inches out of the rear, so 20 inches. I actually looked up the factory chassis and body diagrams for these trucks, and it is actually 16 1/4 out of the front, 3 3/4 out of the rear. That is the difference in front of the axle measurements and behind the axle measurements on a short bed truck versus a long bed truck. I'm not going to get too in depth because I learned some things and some better ways to do it, which I'm going to apply to the rear. So I'm going to show you how I do it on the rear using tricks that I learned on the front. Well, there's that. I didn't get as straight of a cut as I wanted with the Sawzall. It's not exactly a precision instrument, but where I strayed, I went to the inside of the line, and I did that kind of on purpose. You can see I've got a little spots that stick out there, so as long as the tape line is true, I will just take the grinder and smooth that all down until it's up to the edge of the tape line, and then I should be able to just and weld together. There's the part you don't need so much. Got a couple little snags and such, but they're all on the correct side of the tape line, so just buzz that on right down to the tape line with the grinder and a couple sheet metal screws and she'll be good to go. Okay, we are ready to test fit the front cap, we'll call it. Cut some chunks out of the old bed and welded them in as braces. You can see where all the tack welds burn through right there. So that way as I slide it on, these parts will line up. Same thing on the other side. And I'll just leave them on there. They won't be that noticeable, and I'll be able to flip the bed up on its nose and get in there and get that all painted when it's all done. So fast forward a bit and we have bed going back together here. I started to tack weld with my whatever wire I had in the welder, like 35 thousandths I think, or whatever I've been welding with, maybe 30. And I was having a little bit of trouble with blowing through, even though I was being patient. So I actually went and did the right thing and got some thinner gauge wire to weld this all up with. Now that I'm also doing the chassis swap, I want to get this kind of ironed out. Then I'm going to deal with fitting the bed onto the Crown Vic chassis and fitting over the hump and all of that before I cut the back, because what will end up happening is the back of the Vic frame will get cut shorter and the back of the bed. If you haven't seen these little guys and you're doing something like this, you need to get them. That is what is holding everything here together. So the little bar goes in the back side of the panel on your butt weld, and then this little square Okay, there we go. This little square goes over like that, and then you tighten down the wing nut and it squeezes the panel in there, and the thickness of this gives you that nice little gap about 1/8 of an inch for your weld to go into. So both sides got a pretty good start on being spot welded. Let's just go over real quick why people are swapping these into old trucks. I guess I kind of took for granted that people that would watch this would be very familiar. People that know old Ford trucks are very familiar with this swap. So here is the Crown Vic front suspension, coilover shock, short long arm suspension. And the main thing that makes it doable, if you see, this here is aluminum, the spring seat. This one's pretty grody and nasty, so it's kind of hard to tell, but you can see right there rack and pinion steering. You can kind of see the cradle that goes across from that side all the way to the other side. And the gist of it is that where these bolts go through right here, there and there, those go through the frame, and now you can unbolt that upper link and that whole front cradle and cross member drops out. Brakes, suspension, steering parts, everything, the rack and pinion steering. And the width of these frame rails is very, very close to the old trucks. Also, the reason people are swapping the entire chassis like I am is the wheelbase front to rear of this Crown Vic is within, I believe it's 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch of what a regular cab short box bump side is. This disc brakes on the rear, 4-link coil sprung suspension with a Watts link, that's about as good as a solid axle gets. So they ride very nice, they handle very well for a big car like they are, and they have good disc brakes all the way around. 4-wheel disc brakes, rack and pinion steering, big brakes on the front. A much more rigid perimeter style frame than what you have with the truck. And the dimensions are very close. There will be some modifications, which you'll see, but that is the big bonus, and they're cheap. This is the poor man's Roadster Shop chassis. As you can tell in my other video, I was tempted for a minute to use this drivetrain just because it's all engineered to work in this chassis and it's fuel injected, it would have cruise and all of that stuff. I did go ahead and zip off the tail shaft and take a look inside there. It is not the tail shaft bushing that's the problem. It's actually the very rear thrust bearing in here, which, doing a little Googling for the 4R70 and 4R75 trannies, it's apparently a pretty common thing. If you have a whining noise from the rear of the transmission in, I believe it's 1 through 3rd gears without the converter locked, and then it goes away in 4th and with the converter locked, that's likely what your issue is. So temptation released. So I got a lot of comments from people, a lot of new viewers. Thank you everybody who is subscribing, I really appreciate it. People not wanting me to modify the truck, basically not wanting to lower it, do this, don't cut it to a short bed. I appreciate what you're saying. There's only so many of these trucks made. But you know what? If you live in a place where short bed trucks are just everywhere for under $1,000, God bless you, and go buy them if you can. Around here, they're not. Around here, long bed 2-wheel drive regular cab trucks are cheap. That's what makes them appealing to build. Short beds, not so much. Let me just talk about short beds for a minute real quick. The reason that guys like to build short beds as far as sport trucks go is because they're more pleasing to the eye. And a lot of that has to do with you have roughly the same amount of bed in front of and behind the wheel well and the axle. It's more aesthetically pleasing. It's sportier looking to have a shorter truck with an equal bed that's more pleasing to the eye. Also, short beds were a lot more rare back in the day. I don't have the numbers exactly, but way more long bed trucks were made. As I said before, the bed that was on the truck is junk. If somebody wants to buy it and the frame, which I'm not cutting at all, by the way, have at it, man. Drop me a comment, shoot me an email. It's yours if you want to make an offer on it. On this episode, we salute Deputy Jacob Almendinger of the Gallatin County Sheriff's Office. Deputy Almendinger was killed while responding to check on a stranded motorist during a snowstorm. He exited his patrol vehicle as it was sliding backwards on the icy road and became trapped underneath it. Deputy Almendinger served the Gallatin County Sheriff's Office for 2 years as a deputy. He previously served as a dispatcher and a search and rescue volunteer for over 8 years. He leaves behind a wife and 3 children. Deputy Almendinger, thank you for your service. A lot of people think about the dangers of being a police officer as being shot by somebody, a bad guy, being stabbed by somebody, being in an altercation with somebody. They don't think about a lot of the dangerous situations that the police face every day that wouldn't even cross your mind. When they say, no, you can't go down this road, it's closed, it's too dangerous to drive on. And then they have to drive down that road to go look for somebody. So keep that in mind. I hope you enjoyed this video and thank you for watching.